Welcome, dear listeners, to the Speak and Flow podcast, where we dive into unique strategies to help you and your team achieve maximum potential and flow even in high stakes moment. And I know that I have one of the best leaders out there to guide us through how to get buy-in. His name is Stephen Marr. He's the Chief Legal and Administrative Officer for ODECA, co-chair for the Bay Area Asian American General Council. He's won numerous awards, including the Association for Corporate Counsel Top 1030-something. Welcome, Stephen.
Thanks for having me, Melinda.
I am so excited to dive in. I know this is a very juicy topic that a lot of my audience members are really wanting to learn more of, which is to get buy-in from different members, different people within the company or clients or stakeholders. So before we dive into that, share with us, like, what are you excited about in your world today?
Sure. So in my role at my current company, one thing I'm really excited about is the customers that we work with. So our core customer right now are coffee shops and cafes, largely independent or kind of smaller chains. It's really great because, small businesses, I think, you can really tell that they love what they do. And working with those people every day and trying to make their lives better is something that brings me joy on a personal level and makes me excited about work. And then I guess on a more like work related level, a couple of things that get me very excited. So in addition to the legal hat that I wear a couple of other hats, and one of those is the HR hat. And as a people team, we're in the middle of an exciting project where we're trying to update our company values. And so it's an exercise where we spend a lot of time thinking about what's important to us, what should we be aspiring to as a company, what should we care about. And so that's given us the opportunity to really dive into the company's culture a lot more and figure out how we can make all of that, get all of that to the next level, which has been
Oh,
exciting. And then,
oh, that is a
yeah,
fun
yeah,
project.
yeah. So it's a lot of
Yeah.
fun running focus groups and just talking to more people at the company. And then we're also growing a lot as a company. And some of that is growth by just, finding customers and bringing them onto our platform. We're also doing some mergers and acquisitions, some M&A. And so all of that is very busy time, but we're very excited to continue to grow and make the company better.
Oh, that's fascinating. They're really lucky to have you as part of their legal team. And so you've led some legal big initiatives and had to talk to multiple stakeholders
Mm.
where people had different opinions and need to still get the buy-in. So what in your experience have you seen where people do it, they have mistakes. They don't do it correctly.
Yeah, so I mean, and some of these will be my mistakes as well, right? Because I've made a lot of them in my time. So I think one of the big things that I see in terms of people not optimizing the message is they think too much from their own perspective, and so when they're trying to get buy-in from other stakeholders in their organization, they're delivering their message. They're delivering, what's persuasive to me versus what's persuasive to the people that I'm speaking to. So, for example, if I'm speaking to other people and I'm from the legal team, but I'm speaking to someone from the finance team, someone from the HR team, someone from the tech team, they're not necessarily going to care about the same things that I care about, or to the same extent that I care about them. And so I think one thing that people sometimes forget is that even though we're all part of the same company, we may have different perspectives about what we want to accomplish and how we should accomplish things. And so I think tailoring your message at the beginning and framing it in the right way, or in the way that you think is more likely to get buy-in from the stakeholders that you're actually talking to. I think that's something that people don't always think about. Um, Another example is when, again, and this relates again to thinking about your audience. thinking about how much information they actually need, and how much detail do I need to go into, and what do they actually need to make the decision. And one thing that I see happen a lot is, people go into a meeting where they only have so much time and they need to deliver a message, and they spend too much time going to the details, getting to kind of a level of detail that the other people in the room don't need to get to understand, and in fact, actually detracts from the impact of their message. And so, because I think there's a tendency when you are owning a project and you know a lot about it to be able to share what you know. But I think, taking a step back and saying, okay, I may know all of this, but how much does everyone else actually need to know in order to understand whether they'll agree with me and want to, do what I'm advocating for. So I think learning to cut out some of that detail can be really
I,
helpful.
yeah. I mean, what are the repercussions of sharing too much? Because like you mentioned, I know so much. I want to share as much as because on my end, if I want to share, it sounds great. It sounds like it makes me feel like I know it all.
Yeah.
But what might be the repercussions or the risk of sharing and oversharing too much detail to an audience that doesn't care
Yeah.
as much?
So I've actually made this mistake before, and it was a really important
Yeah.
lesson that I learned very early on. So when I started my legal career, I was at a law firm,
Okay.
and at a law firm, you do a lot of communication by email. And so I remember that I was tasked with a research project, and I had to kind of figure out what the answer was
Okay.
on the project. And so I wrote this like very detailed email that had everything that I had done and all of the basically trying to show the work that I had put in to show that I had really come to this answer
Right.
through being very thoughtful and being very thorough.
Right.
And then I sent that email off, and then the response I got was like, well, what's the answer? Because it clearly, like, I had put the answer at the bottom of a very long email, probably like 10 paragraphs more than I needed. And that was actually really helpful because I realized that I had written that email for myself and what
Mhm.
wanting to show off what I had done rather than sending the email with the purpose
Mhm.
of making it really clear to the person I was emailing, what the answer was, and very briefly how I got to that answer. And so now when I think about how I communicate, I try to flip that script, and instead of starting with like all this background information, I just kind of start with here's what I found, and then you can go into a little bit of the detail enough to give them confidence that you know what you're talking about. But starting with the answer has been a really helpful lesson for me in terms of communicating.
Right. Yeah. So give the information what they need, want first.
Yes.
Yes. It's so true because we want to come, but your thought process was, I mean, it wasn't ill harm, it didn't harm anybody. You're actually just showcasing what you did, all the research, but at the same time, yes, stepping back to really think through who's the audience, how are they going to receive all this information?
Yeah,
It could be
exactly.
just an order. It could have been, had you just flipped it, it probably would have worked really well.
Yeah, so should have led with like, here's the answer, and then I was like,
Yeah,
and then sometimes what I do now is like, if you actually want to know, all the details, here it is. But then
right,
I put it like lower down so that if they care and it's the sort of person that does want to know the details, because sometimes
right,
they do, they have the opportunity to look at it. But if they don't care, they just want the answer so they can move to their next decision, then they can
right.
have that really cleanly at the top.
Right. So when you're about to go into a meeting with multiple perspectives, different perspectives, people are not on the same page, and you want to get the buy-in from other stakeholders, like, what are your steps to prepare then?
Um, so I think there's a few different things you can do, and the amount of time you put into this sort of prep, probably you tailor it right to the importance of the meeting, how important it is to get the buy-in. Do you think it's going to be difficult to get buy-in, or do you think it's going to be easy? If you think people are already likely to be on board, maybe you don't
Uh,
need to invest as much time, but
uh,
there's a few things that I like to do, whether it's me leading the meeting or someone on my team. One is to just understand who the stakeholders are. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but if you know you're going to have representatives from certain functions and you know that they're likely to care about certain things, making sure you weave that into your story, or your argument, or your the case that you're making. I think you also need to know your audience, not just based on the team or the function they're from, but you may need to know about them individually. So if you have someone, they care about, this one thing, and they always ask a question about this one topic,
Yeah.
you make sure you either mention it right away, or you have a very quick answer, so that if they bring it up, you don't spend time, worrying about it, or worrying that you're going to give an answer that won't satisfy them, and then they'll be thinking about it the rest of the time. Um, so I
Well,
think,
I have a question about that.
sure.
I'm thinking about this. What if it's something that it's an opinion that you don't, that it's the opposite from yours? It's probably better to bring it up, right? Like you
I
said.
think
But
so.
what if
Yeah.
it's something that is the opposite opinion? Yeah, bring it up.
Yeah, and contextualize it, right? And sometimes it depends on your communication style, but one thing that I found to be effective is almost joking about it, making it
Yeah.
lighthearted. So,
Oh, right,
you know,
right.
and it again, that won't work with every personality,
Everything.
but with
Right,
some people who I know always care about something, I'll even make a joke, because like, I know you're going to ask this,
right,
we just get
right,
this out of the way, and then you
right.
give your response, and they know that you're thinking about them, and that they're
Yeah,
being heard, right? Even if you may
yeah,
have a different opinion, or
yeah.
you may have a slightly different take on what they care about, at least they know that you're kind of thinking about them and accounting for how they view the world.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So going back to the preparation, it's like you said, thinking about the entire team, where what is the entire team, the other perspective thinking, but then also drilling down to each individual. What does that individual care about?
Yeah, and
And
that again, it's situation dependent, right? If you have a meeting and you're talking to 30 people, you probably can't do that, but
Mhm.
you can do some of it, right? You can understand, what are the 3 points that are going to be most important to the greatest number of people in that room, or if there's a subset of that group that really needs to be on your side, maybe focusing on those people.
Yeah. Is there anything else with regard to buy-in?
Uh, so this is going to be like very similar to what I just said, but even just speaking the language of the people that you're talking to. So um, as lawyers, sometimes I think the trap that we fall into is we think that everyone else thinks the same way that we do. So everyone else is very concerned about risk. Everyone else
Yeah.
understands the Latin phrases that we use, or the acronyms that we use. And I think this is true for people in different areas, right? We all assume that this kind of shared language that we have, other people understand it, and that's not always the case. So whenever I'm working with someone on my team, whether they're a lawyer, or they're someone from our people team, or from whatever team, and they're doing kind of a dry run with me on a presentation, I try to strip out all the jargon, strip out like anything that maybe is a common phrase for them, but not a common phrase for the general public or the rest of the company, and make sure that they're speaking as plainly as possible. Because I think, again, the more specialized you get, the more kind of phrases and acronyms and other and specific jargon you use that other people are just not going to understand. And
Hmm.
people will not always ask if they don't understand, because they don't want to look like they don't know what they're talking about. And so
Yeah.
I think I always put that burden on the person communicating to be clear from the start, and not and to try to like make it so that no one will have to ask you, what does that mean? Or I don't understand that acronym. So
Mhm.
it, so so I think that's really important to do, because you don't want people to feel like they have to ask, because they may not feel comfortable doing so, and they may just stay
Right.
silent, and then they won't understand what you're saying.
Right, right. And then you could have missed the mark.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
and they're not asking, and you think
They're
that they
thinking about,
understand
they're
that.
spending the next like 20
Yeah,
seconds thinking about what does that mean, and then
yeah,
saying whatever you're saying for that period of time.
right, right. So as an attorney, you have to balance the information giving, right? You're talking about transparency and being very transparent in your communication. So how
Mhm.
do you balance like the difference between how much to deliver to somebody and still being transparent?
Yeah. So
If
that's
you
something
can't, yeah.
that's actually something that I think I'm still in the process of learning.
Uh-huh.
And part of it is just knowing your audience, right? And knowing what information will be useful to them and what information won't. So one thing that I've seen sometimes people do not as effectively as they can is, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is just providing too much information. And sometimes, and this is something that I think about a lot. Obviously at my company, we have executive meetings, right, where it's the executive team talking about very kind of high level or strategic initiatives for the company, maybe bigger things that we're thinking about or concerned about or need to decide. And then after those meetings, there's always the intent is always to cascade some of that information down, right, to the
Right.
people on my team, to the people that report to me, and then they do the same thing and cascade that information further down. But I think at every layer, you're not always going to be or you're almost never going to be passing along 100% of the information
Mhm.
that you're provided, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think one of the reasons is um, it's not going to be useful, right? Because the people on my team, they have their roles that they have, and they may not need to know, right, 70% of the information that came out of that meeting. And
Mhm.
so it's my job, as a communicator, right, and as a leader, it's my job to figure out what is the information that they need to know to be able to do their jobs more effectively. What's the information that they may not need to know, but um, they would appreciate knowing because then they feel like I'm being communicative with them. And then
Right.
what's the information that I should not pass along, whether because it's confidential, or because I think it'll actually be harmful for them because they may spend a lot of time thinking about this thing that is not part of their job, they have no control over, instead of like being able to focus on their job effectively. And I think that's really hard to do. And again, I'm always in the process of learning how to do that better. But I think that sort of analysis is the same thing you can do whether you're trying to deliver information to a client or deliver from information to a colleague to convince them of something at the company, or even in your interpersonal communications with your family, right? You're always trying to figure out how to filter communication in the right way. And I think that's a really, really hard thing to do. And no one's perfect at it. I'm definitely not, but it's something I think about a lot.
You're a very genuine person. I really love that. And I think those buckets are great in terms of how you categorize it. Okay, what is the information they need to know? This is just, yeah, it's very easy to determine that. It's the information after that. It's like need to know but appreciate. Like it would
Yep.
be helpful for them. That information is helpful to share because then they feel a part of something, they feel like a part of the team. And but then the information that is harmful that they might, and especially if they can't control it, that's
Yep.
information that you definitely have to think more carefully about and be more cautious about. Only to, yeah, protect them and also the entire company. But and maybe you tell them at a different time when you have more information, there's different reasons why maybe you don't share that last piece.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah, but those buckets are great. I think that's very helpful for
Good.
me,
Yeah,
and
I'm
I think
glad.
that would be I'm
I
learning that
was like,
too.
it
And
works for me. Hopefully it works for other people
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you are very successful and you've had a lot of experience and history about, you stem from, you told me your story about how you even knew you're going to become an attorney anyways. Can you share a little bit about that? Because
Sure.
it's fascinating.
Yeah, so I think my parents knew before I knew that I was going to be an attorney, and they would always joke because I was not the best kid, and I would argue with them all the time, even as like like I think as young as 8, and so they would always joke that they always knew that I was going to be an attorney, but I think I first thought that might be a path for me when I was in high school. And when I was in high school, I was part of our debate team, and they did the same thing in college. But I think what was really helpful about that was obviously when you think about debate, you think about people standing, at a lectern or a podium and arguing with each other and trying to persuade a judge of your position. But there's a lot more to debate than that. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of behind the scenes preparation that goes into it. There's practicing how you speak and how you communicate, learning, how to communicate effectively to get buy-in from your judge.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of that extra work behind the scenes, when I was talking, I think, to a career counselor at some point, they said, look, like, not a lot of people necessarily enjoy all of these things, like the public speaking, the research that you have to do, all of that, the kind of organization, making outlines. And they said, have you considered a career in law? And I hadn't because I was in high school and, wasn't thinking about what I was going to do for a career, but that did kind of start me thinking, is that something I would enjoy? And I talked to people as I continued, through college, and it did seem like something I would really enjoy and be decent at. And so I ended up going to law school and however many years later, still enjoying being a lawyer and everything. So I guess it was good advice.
Yeah, and then all those skill sets, like you still have them, you still use them, the preparation, right? The behind the scenes, the
Mhm.
research, the
Yeah.
practice, and then going up there to, yeah, talk about your position. And I love that you're flexible and you listen. It sounds like you're authentic in what you say. And so I feel like that makes you a really good attorney.
Yeah, it's actually funny because you don't, I guess I don't really think about that all the time, but a lot of the skills, when you think of them more as adversarial, right? Like
Yeah.
you're debating with someone, you're arguing with them,
Yeah,
you can apply those same skills in like non-adversarial contexts, right? As you
right.
said, like when I'm just trying to convince someone at the company or I'm just trying to build a relationship with a colleague, you can apply some of those same skills.
Mhm.
And it's not, people pitted against each other. It's more just general persuasion.
Yeah. And those but the skills that you're talking about, it may not like you said, it seems and the off the cuff seems adversarial, but the actual skills is more about listening.
Yeah, yeah.
Really, right? We're not combating, we're actually listening if you really want to have a persuasion or a persuasive perspective. Or
Yeah,
right.
yeah, because one of the things when when you're debating is you
Yeah,
have to convince the judge, and one of the things that you learn is to read their nonverbals, right? So
got it.
like you can tell when someone's confused, or you can tell when someone disagrees with you. They'll make a face sometimes because, not everyone has a great poker face. And so learning to like adapt your message in real time based on um, how you think the audience is receiving or not receiving your message
Mhm.
is very useful in a lot of different contexts. So,
Ah, I've learned so much. I think these are all so very helpful. Can you share with us a story or an example of how you've gotten buy-in?
sure, yeah. So, let me think of one. I mean, this is a pretty generic example, but it's something that's happened probably a few times, and so I think it's a good one. In one of my jobs, I oversee a team, and
Uh-huh.
we would be in charge of like these projects that were pretty important to the company, but also very high stress and a lot of eyes on them, and a
Mhm.
lot of representation from different teams at the company. And so, in going into those meetings, knowing that you had to kind of get buy-in, that we're going to take a certain path forward, uh, we would do a lot of prep into like making sure that our message was as likely to succeed as possible. And so, we applied a lot of the principles that we've talked about in the past, 15 minutes. And one of those was, we knew that there were going to be certain stakeholders from certain functions and they cared about certain things. And so we made sure that our presentation or our agenda weaved in those concepts that were likely to bring buy-in. And another thing that we did was we went around before the meeting and kind of got some informal feedback from people that we knew were going to be at the meeting, and kind of got made sure that it was okay with them, so that when we presented it in the meeting, we already kind of had allies who agreed with us and were able to kind of say that in the meeting, and that obviously helps because it shows that you have different people from different groups agreeing on a path forward. Then we also knew that there were people who thought about the issue a little bit differently, and we would have to do some actual persuading in the meeting. And so we spent actually a good amount of our prep time focused on those people, the people who maybe had different concerns than us, or thought that it made sense to take a slightly different path. And we kind of prepared, how would we deal with that? How would we address it in a way that still kind of communicates our position, but also makes them feel like they had been heard,
Mhm.
which again is like a very difficult sort of position to weave to kind
Right.
of navigate. And so we were not always 100% successful, but I will say that the prep work that we did ended up being hugely helpful in not only more often than not getting us to what we thought was the right solution, but doing it um, uh, quicker than I think it would have otherwise taken. Like maybe it would have taken 2 or 3 meetings, but we could get it done in one meeting,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That was very clear example, right? Of actually applying all the skills and turning it into, and then did you, in the particular moment in that situation, were you successful in turning and getting everybody on the same page?
Yes, not
Yeah.
not every time.
Not
You
every time.
always had like
Okay.
sometimes you would have a straggler or two, but
Got it.
I think overall in most of those situations we were able to get at least people, even if they weren't like fully 100%. I agree, this is the right way. They were at least um, willing to go along with what we had proposed because we came across as thoughtful and
Yeah.
considering others' views, and we hadn't just like decided we should do this and let's just and
Yeah.
everyone else needs to come along. We showed that we cared what other people thought and that we had put a lot of thought into what our proposal was.
Right, right. And then also you streamlined it, like in terms of three meetings, one meeting versus two or three.
Right. Because people
Great.
people's time's valuable. No one wants to
Yeah,
spend all day
right,
in
right,
meetings. So yeah,
right. So if they felt heard, then you can move along faster.
exactly.
Find the commonality.
Mhm.
Love it. Thank you so much, Stephen. So what is your one leadership golden takeaway that you want people to remember?
Um, so for me, and I suspect this is true for most other people, but for me, the I think the one um, trait that I think has served me very well is being authentic. And um, by authentic, I don't mean, you have to overshare and like say everything that's always on your mind, but I think authentic meaning knowing yourself well enough to know, um, how you come across and how you communicate, and not trying to create this almost like facade of who you are, depending on who you're talking to. So I do think it's important to build rapport and to be able to speak the language of your audience, but you can do that in an authentic way.
Mhm.
Um, and I've always found that when I have been authentic and kind of represented who I am and communicated from that viewpoint, it's always ended up being better in the end than trying to almost change my personality or change who I am depending on who I'm talking to. Because if it's not authentically you, at some point you're gonna slip and you're gonna, not be able to act that way forever. And so um,
Mhm.
it's going to be a lot easier for you mentally if you just are yourself and
Mhm.
find a way to be persuasive and to communicate that is authentic to you.
I love it. I love it. I think it's so true. Definitely be authentic, be true to you, speak your truth. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, as difficult as it is, but it does require that you have higher self-awareness about who you are. And it comes from ourselves, like taking a deep dive into who we are first. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, and I'm not perfect at it, and I
Right.
don't think there probably is anyone who's fully self-aware, but I think the
Right.
more you understand how you operate, how you think, how you come across to other people, um, then the more self-aware that you are, then I think the better ultimately that you'll come across to others.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay to have these weaknesses, blind spots. And the more we have acceptance of them, I think does, like it comes across more
Yes.
natural and
People
more
can tell
authentic.
when you're
Yeah.
not being authentic,
Right, right,
even if you
right.
think you're being really good at
Right, right.
so.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. It was a really fun conversation. I really enjoyed it. And just because these high stakes conversations are really important, they matter. And so you've shared a lot of great nuggets and takeaways for people to be able to navigate these difficult conversations. So I really appreciate the time.
Of course, and thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the discussion as well, and hopefully it was, a couple of useful things for people.
I do. I believe that. And so thank you, audience, for being here. I trust that you've gotten your leadership golden takeaway today. So implement them. And remember, anytime you have a chance to communicate, you also have a chance to connect, to inspire, and to make a bigger difference in this world and the community. And until next time, I am your sister in flow. Take care. Much love. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining the conversation today. Are you curious on how you measure up with your ability to speak in flow? Come grab my free self-assessment at https://speakinflow.com/assessment. And I'll see you on the other side.